Hello, welcome to CrossCurrents, produced by the City of Fort Collins in cooperation with the Larimer County League of Women Voters. I'm Barbara Rutstein, the moderator for today's program. Our topic is electric vehicles, opportunities and challenges. With gasoline prices remaining high, even though the United States consumption has fallen to 2001 levels, there are new initiatives to perfect and promote plug-in electric vehicles. The President said in a recent speech in Illinois, "The only way to break this cycle of spiking gas prices is to shift our cars and trucks entirely off oil." To encourage this policy, in 2009, a group of national business leaders formed the Electrification Coalition. Its mission is to reduce American dependence on oil and to do this by facilitating the deployment of electric vehicles. Everyone involved realizes the magnitude and difficulties in shifting the majority of the transportation system from petroleum to electricity. Locally, Fort Collins and Loveland, along with Colorado State University, are now part of an effort to promote the use of electric vehicles. This effort is called Drive Electric Northern Colorado. To discuss this national and local program, we have promoters of the project and skeptics so that we can better understand the costs and benefits of our future transportation needs. Welcome to our studio and TV audiences and to our panelists. On my right is Derek Johnson of Prieto Battery. He's a co-founder, scientist, and director of engineering. On his right is Roger Hoffman, vice president of Northern Colorado Commuter Rail. On his right is Lara Williams, founder of Green Team Real Estate. On her right is Ben Prohaska, director of strategic initiatives of the Electrification Coalition, and on his right is Tom Vosburg, policy and project manager of the City of Fort Collins Light and Power Operations. Thank you for being here. Let's start with a little history. I read that the Electrification Coalition started in 2009. Ben, can you give us a brief history of that and tell us what's been going on since 2009?
Sure, and thank you for having me, Barbara. I'm excited to be here. I think as background, the Electrification Coalition started out as an organization that was sprung out of a group called Securing America's Future Energy. And when you start to talk about the challenges that exist right now with our transportation sector, the Securing America's Future Energy was really focused on the idea of how to reduce oil consumption. It's a huge challenge for us in the United States. It affects our energy security or our national security. It has a huge impact on costs for consumers. And it also is something where there's obviously significant environmental impacts. And so when you start to look at solutions for reducing our dependency on oil in this country, one of the best opportunities we have is to target our transportation sector. Right now, our transportation sector basically is responsible for about 95% of our oil consumption in the United States. So if you want to solve that problem, which ultimately we recognize we need to come up with some solutions and be aggressive about solving that problem, electric vehicles really represented one of the best scalable opportunities. We can get these vehicles on the road. We have electricity is ubiquitous, and so it represented the best way that we can rapidly create a transitional technology that's going to start to chip away at that oil dependency issue. So, in turn, started the Electrification Coalition as an organization and a dedicated rallying point for the business community and also for enthusiasts who care about this issue and start to see this as a light of day opportunity. And so we represent the full supply chain of the electric vehicle industry. So it's the people who pull the ore out of the ground that turn it into a battery. It's the people who make the charging stations. It's the manufacturers of the vehicles, and it's some of the largest transportation sector companies across the globe.
So they're all part of the coalition, is what you're saying?
Yes, I mean, people who represent those sectors are all part of the coalition.
Yes,
Absolutely.
okay. Now, I also read that there was bipartisan legislation that was going to be introduced. What's happened with that?
So we introduced a bill roughly around 2010 called the Electric Vehicle Deployment Act. And it was actually a follow-up to I guess it's kind of a Bible, but called the Electric Vehicle Roadmap. And basically the idea is that it was to create some funding to support communities to create electric vehicle deployment communities. And so yes, there was strong bipartisan support, but ultimately, like many things, it got swallowed up in the sort of challenges that might exist in Washington. And it's part of the reason that we're in Fort Collins, I think.
Okay, and Tom, tell us how the city got involved in this.
Well, the city's had a long history in having a number of programs focused on sustainability, environmental protection, looking at alternative forms of transportation. So, and then as a light and power utility, we've had, it's just part of our core business to pay attention to things that are emerging in that industrial space, and obviously electric vehicles have the potential to very much affect our role in the community. So for some time, the city and the utility had been looking at efforts around what could be called electric vehicle community readiness. That's actually a term that's out there in the electric vehicle world. And it's about planning ahead to think about how do we get ready for these things if they're coming. So part of it's looking at the electric supply system, make sure it's got appropriate capacity. It's thinking about how do our parking policies and our building permitting processes and other things accommodate things like charging stations and that kind of stuff. So we saw the stuff coming, and we're starting a little work program about getting ready. And part of that included the idea of doing a small pilot program to fund publicly available charging stations. So we had a small initiative that we were structuring pretty much to align with some efforts at the state to get going on this kind of work. And then one thing led to another. Folks from the Electrification Coalition came by, and they're basically undergoing a national search process to look for some potential partner communities to start rolling out a more expanded program. And that's when we got into a conversation, and that's how we became involved.
I see. Okay. Now, what other communities are involved nationwide?
Well, I guess I'd look to Ben to speak to the Electrification Coalition's, community-based programs.
Are we the only ones in the country?
For the Electrification Coalition, yes. In terms of this specific project, we went through a search process. I don't ask me to name all the cities because I won't be able to.
No, I won't. It's fine.
But ultimately, we looked at around 30 cities. Where we went through a number of criteria to determine what the best location was for us to run a deployment community. At the end of the day, what we hope to create is a replicable and scalable model that other communities can follow the lead on. And so we were looking for a place that focused on innovation. And so Fort Collins and Loveland and frankly Northern Colorado continues to be a place that is a leader in innovation. We also looked for a community that could not only create a plan, but could also follow through with that plan. And we think that the leadership here has demonstrated that continuously, that they're a community that is not only able to create a plan and have a vision, but is also able to execute that. There's also some things about the state of Colorado that are incredibly favorable. We have one of the best tax credits for an electric vehicle. So if anyone out there is considering the purchase of a plug-in electric hybrid vehicle or an all-electric vehicle, you're potentially eligible for $6,000 in tax credits from the state of Colorado, and then an additional $7,500 at the federal level. And so those things combined with the leadership here is part of the reason that we ultimately ended up in Fort Collins.
Okay, and when we talk about electric cars, we have to talk about batteries. Derek, where does your company fit in?
Well, we were initially engaged with the Electrification Coalition during the initial city selection process, and Ben can speak more to that as well.
But what does your company do?
So our company is an innovator in solid-state lithium-ion batteries with a focus not on electric vehicles but also on grid storage as well. And so we're trying to solve some of the cost issues that are associated with lithium-ion batteries, the reliability issues, and also the safety issues. And so, for instance, one of the biggest issues that comes up frequently is the cost of electric vehicles in comparison to a vehicle that's powered by an internal combustion engine. And so the reason why it's even feasible for even a small percentage of the market is because they scale the battery so that you can get about this 100-mile range for an electric vehicle. The problem is that the increased cost associated with the battery itself and the systems that control the battery require about a 7-year time frame on a return to recoup the extra money that was needed to purchase the more expensive vehicle. And so our focus is really to bring down that cost, make a safer battery, and also develop a manufacturing process so that we can manufacture the batteries here in the United States.
Okay, okay. Now, Roger, you're a bit of a skeptic, or at least a promoter of commuter rail. Why do you think the emphasis is on electric vehicles rather than on mass transit?
Well, Barbara, I'm certainly not a skeptic, but of electric vehicles. And I'm not sure this is an either-or situation. What I would say is that with electric vehicles, the focus is primarily on a technological transition, hopefully to a more sustainable, more energy independent source for locomotion. But it's still relying on the single occupant vehicle primarily, and that's what it's designed around. And I could just say that I think, given the infrastructure we have and in past investments, we're not going to see the end of single passenger vehicles, the car, anytime soon. On the other hand, commuter rail really is a transition both of technology, and it can adapt, in fact, to electric technologies fairly easily. I won't go into detail about that, but that's one of the beauties of it. But even beyond that, we're talking about a transition of modes, and that's a very profound effect when you look at the implications for community sustainability much more broadly taken, and regional sustainability, both of the economy and of the environment, quality of life, as well as addressing a number of social issues. I can't go into all of the advantages at this point, but just to touch on some of them, obviously some of us are getting older, we're not getting any younger, the population of seniors continues to grow, and many of that age group, as well as younger people who really don't want to be wedded to a personal car, still need transportation, and so we need to start looking at investments in alternative modes as well.
Okay, well, we're going to have a car that just drives itself, right?
That's possible, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it too soon.
Right, okay. Lara, your real estate business is based on using electric cars. Tell us about that. Why did you decide to do it?
Well, the Green Team Real Estate is a true green business. We are evangelists for more sustainably built homes and more sustainably updated homes. And we were early adopters of the hybrid Prius car back in 2007. And when it became feasible for us to actually purchase the Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid EV last year, we jumped at the opportunity. We do a lot of driving, I guess relative to a lot of people in Fort Collins, probably about 25 to 30 miles a day. And we love the idea that we could actually use very little gas. We also have an opportunity to kind of promote EVs because we have a lot of clients riding around with us, and you wouldn't believe how excited they are when they find out that they're riding around in an electric vehicle. There's a lot of excitement, and we get to kind of talk about the product as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Have you ever gone out to your garage and found that you forgot to plug in the vehicle and you can't go?
early on, it was a little hard to remember. We don't do that very often, and fortunately, the plug-in Chevy Volt has a backup motor, so it's a generator, and if you did forget to charge it, you don't have to worry about not having the ability to drive the next day.
Okay, and then for all of you, it seems to me this came up, rather quickly. Does it have to do with the price of gasoline, the environment, worry over politics in the Middle East, or all of those? What do you think?
I'll take a stab at that. I do think that ultimately one of the things that we continue to see is we know that oil is a finite resource. And so ultimately we have to come up with solutions. So that's part of the reason that this is becoming more of an issue. I think also, we're fortunate in that we have people like Carlos Gos, who's leads Nissan, who has vision for the idea that we can actually make a transition and we can start to take advantage of technological innovation. And so people like Prieto, who are, maybe they're the next generation of, and hopefully not that far next generation, but are the next generation of batteries that do start to break down the costs and actually make the amount of distance we can travel by battery power a reality. But ultimately, when we look at oil, there's huge challenges with reliability. There's huge challenges with costs, and that's something that hits the pocketbook directly. And so, and actually, Derek, not to challenge the question, but I think in this case, when you start to look at cost recovery, it's starting to come a lot sooner even than 7 years for people. When you start to think about total cost of ownership for an electric vehicle, and especially in a community like Northern Colorado, where electricity costs are relatively low, you actually start to see those cost recoveries even faster than 7 years. And hopefully with their technology, it'll be even faster than that. Right. The only other thing I would mention is I think people start to realize the environmental impacts. We're a community where that's a reality. And so when we can start to look at ways that we diversify the fuel that's powering our transportation system, people get excited about that and they want to find those solutions. And then I will mention one last thing: the cars are cool. When you drive them, they start to sell themselves. And I think one of the first things that people should do is just go get in one, and you'll start to realize how great these vehicles are.
I guess I'd like to add on, I think I heard you make the statement that, this all of a sudden seems to come out of nowhere, and why all of a sudden is there a focus? Actually, I think that there, for quite a few years, there's been a lot of work going on by a lot of different folks around electric vehicles. It takes a long time to bring one of these products to the market. All of the major automobile manufacturers have got some kind of an electric vehicle roadmap in their strategy. They recognize the technology's maturing and the environment, the energy future. It's inevitable. I mean, oil will run out at some time. There has to be a game plan. Plus, it's a national priority. Universities have been working in the research space. I think what's happening here in Fort Collins, why it's all of a sudden on people's radar screens, is the beauty of this concept of the deployment community project that the Electrification Coalition's thought about. And they've said, look, all these people are working on stuff. We're not connecting the dots and talking with a unified voice. So it's this idea of bringing together the whole ecosystem, I think is the phrase that you talk about. Screens and gaining a higher level of visibility than maybe it has in the past. But this is not a flash in the pan. There's an awful lot of R&D.
Well, it's coming together, I guess, now. Because I remember when Platte River had electric vehicles, I don't know, 12 years ago or more. Yeah. Maybe 20. But then they seemed to peter out, and I think the city had one or two about 20 or 30 years ago.
The technology has definitely matured. The lithium-ion battery is a profound breakthrough. The current generation, and I know what you guys are working on, is another significant step forward beyond that. And so the cars are really they're not modified golf carts. They are cool. When you ride in one, they're wonderful low-end torque, silent, handle well. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it, I think.
Right. And how long has CSU or people at CSU been working on these batteries?
Well, Amy started working on the particular concept for Prieto battery when she became a faculty member there in 2005. And so CSU has really been instrumental in the development and in the start of the company, because the core technology was actually developed in her academic lab in the Department of Chemistry. So not only was the core technology developed at CSU, and universities need to play a huge role in technology development, but their technology transfer and the facilitation of our growth has really been helped by the university as well.
Mm-hmm. And how long does it take for you to charge your car?
Well, actually, we have 110 power in our garage, and we were concerned at first that this was going to be a problem. But if we plug our car in the evening, we come out and it's charged in the morning. We could have installed a 220 outlet in our garage, but we didn't need to, because the way that our lifestyle is, we don't have to worry about it. We remember to plug it in and it's ready to go in the morning.
Uh-huh. And how much is it costing you more than your other electric bill? I mean, if people want to know a comparison.
Sure. We actually have very low power usage. A family of 2 and fairly energy efficient household. Our electric bill doubled, but that's not saying a lot, because it went from about, I think, $30 a month to $60 a month. However, how we've resolved that is we actually worked with a company in town to just install a solar lease, solar PV on our house, which is covering all of the costs, the additional cost of charging the car. So we've basically just, we're paying about $30 a month now, but we're doing it with solar PV instead of the, plug-in, power from Platte River.
Yeah, and of course you're not paying for gasoline at all.
Correct.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, and what about the mechanical part of these cars? Is it more costly in maintenance or less? I have no idea. Does anybody know?
So I think that one difference, and maybe just a quick thing for the viewers, there's 2 different cars that people could choose from, basically. There's a plug-in electric hybrid vehicle,
yes,
which is what Lara owns, and so that's a Volt, and it means that it has some form of gasoline engine,
oh yes,
and then also a battery engine. And then
right.
our battery electric vehicles, which people often refer to as BEV, which in this community probably has a different connotation. But ultimately, those are all electric vehicles. So that is an example of that would be a Leaf.
Yes.
I should also mention that out of the OEM, the original manufacturers, so people like Nissan, Ford, BMW, all of those, they all are now on the verge of releasing a vehicle that would be available from whatever car maker you could choose from. That'll be some form of a battery-powered electric vehicle, whether it has a gas engine or just just the battery.
So that would be a hybrid.
Correct, and
okay.
different than what we would think of as a traditional hybrid.
Oh,
right?
okay. Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, though, maintenance costs. One of the things, and actually we'll have on Drive Electric, nocode.org, we'll have a calculator that'll give people an opportunity to sort of do a total cost comparison, right? Why should I purchase this? Is it not only because I care about the environment, but is it also because I'm actually cost conscious? And so the benefits here are there are no oil changes for most of these vehicles. There's no transmission, so there's no transmission fluid. Brakes actually will last up to 100,000 miles because they have what's called regenerative braking. So that when you brake the vehicle, it's actually helping charge the battery. And so maintenance costs should be significantly less. And when you actually talk to a Nissan dealership and you talk about your maintenance rotation for a Leaf, all you actually have to come in is they do a small battery check, and that's basically, and they rotate the tires. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the huge benefits. It's also the reason that fleets are looking at electric vehicles as a cost savings mechanism. And so New Belgium in town has added 2 Leafs to their fleet, and we're going to start to see more and more communities add these vehicles to their fleets.
Okay. Now, let's get to charging stations. That seems to be an issue. How many do we have? How many do we need? Where will they be? Who will pay for them? All those good things.
Well, the vast majority of electric vehicle charging will take place at the consumer's home, or if it's a fleet vehicle, at a workplace, the yard. Mm-hmm. And so at home, The charging station could be the 110 household outlet that's already in your garage. Or you could upgrade that to a small device that would run on 220 that would charge faster. So, and for the most folks, charging it up overnight, they've got good enough range that you go all day and you come back home and you charge again at home. So, people talk about thinking there have to be charging stations out in the community, kind of the way we have gas stations out in the community. But actually, for the regular, repeatable trip, there's not that big a deal. It's when you do something unusual, like you've done your basic trip and then you're going, going a long distance to a shopping center where you haven't normally gone, or something that's out of the ordinary. That's where it's kind of nice to have, there's some kind of a safety net out there to handle the unusual situation. And that's where publicly available charging stations would come in. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of different models for how those can be provided. Some municipalities or utilities sponsor them and operate them, and it's usually a fee-for-service kind of thing. Or there are private businesses see it as an amenity they can offer their customers and put one out there, and maybe there's no charge. They're fairly, basically it's like a pedestal with an outlet, or some kind of a connector that goes to the car, and kind of like a gas pump, and they're fairly discreet. So we're starting to see them in other communities pop up at shopping malls or at key destinations like at civic facilities. The city of Fort Collins, we're going to site charging stations we're going to try to get between 4 and 6 of them out there that will be managed by the Fort Collins utilities. We've already determined the first 2 sites. Those will be at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery,
yes.
And then also at the downtown Civic Center parking garage is the other place we're working on. We've got to finalize the designs and stuff there, and then we envision that there'll be some charging stations at a couple of other city facilities, but we're still finalizing on exactly where.
And so, but only one car can charge at a time, is that?
Yeah, well, what we'll be doing is putting in more than one charging station at a location, so if somebody is charging there, there's probably a probability of another spot. Now, some of it is how long does it take to charge. If you just plug into your regular outlet, it can take quite a few hours to fully recharge a car, like overnight. There's what's called level 2 charging, which is a step up, can recharge a car faster, like maybe takes 4 hours or 2 hours or 4 hours to do a pretty good charge. There's a cutting edge technology that's emerging right now, which is called DC quick charging. Very, very powerful charger that can actually recharge something like a Nissan Leaf, pure battery car, in maybe 20 to 30 minutes, which is really sort of a game changer on the whole idea about what it takes to recharge. It starts to be that gas pump for an electric car. Yeah. And that's actually, we are going to be implementing probably, I think it is the first DC fast charger in the state of Colorado.
It is for sure.
Yeah, and if not the actual Rocky Mountain West. That's very new technology. It's same kind of stuff that's being implemented on the West Coast up and down Highway 5. There's Interstate 5. So anyway. And
what do they cost? And so Light and Power is paying it. We pay for it when we pay for our lights.
No, well, we have a small pilot program that's being funded through Light and Power. We are actually, the funding is, we're getting private donations. The equipment at the Museum of Discovery has actually been donated by Electrification Coalition partners, as well as some local folks. We've just received a grant from the state of Colorado as well to help offset both some of the equipment and installation costs. The actual charging station, like a level 2 charging station's couple $1,000s for the equipment.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that expensive. And the hard part is actually what may be more expensive. Depending on the place it's installed, you may have to dig or trench in order to pull the electric line out to where it goes. And that's actually usually the more expensive part of the installation. They can just hang on a wall, and then that's pretty easy to install.
Okay,
So,
any other comments?
Yeah, just one. You can actually, if you're a home user, you can actually get like a wall unit that can be as low as $500. And it just depends on the capability of the charger. So this is the level 2 charger. If you're plugging in at home, which I actually have a Leaf, And so right now I have an extension cord that runs out of the back of my house because I don't have a garage. And I plug my car in every night. And that is as much as I need. And I am driving, as you might imagine, helping to coordinate this campaign. I'm driving all over Fort Collins and Loveland. But it's all I ever need is to plug in at night.
Hi, yes, my name is Ross, and my wife and I certainly would say are enthusiasts. We have a Volt, and also I converted 2 cars myself to electric. But my question is, although we're personal enthusiasts, I think perhaps we're realists when it comes to the adoption rate and some of the, I guess my question is, what are some of the policies, does the EV Coalition have proposed policies for policymakers about things like how do you, over time, as more vehicles become electric, how do we account for the road maintenance transitioning away from gas taxes, for example?
Sure. In some ways, Ross, I appreciate the opportunity to just point people to this. This is it really breaks down, I think, how you get to the end point, right? So how are we actually going to get to that point of adoption that's going to have an impact in a real fashion on our oil consumption? Ultimately, we're going to have to, that's a problem we're going to have to solve. We're going to have to figure out a way that everybody's paying their fair share, whether it's a compressed natural gas vehicle, whether it's an electric vehicle, whether it's a vehicle that actually can carry a bunch more people like Roger supports. And I think, we all recognize that we need mass transit in conjunction with personal vehicles. But at the end of the day, I think the reality is we want to start and make sure we get this transition to happen and help move that ball along, especially as people just don't understand or don't know the technology yet. Let's make it easy for people to access the technology. Let's make it easy for people to understand it, and let's make it easy for people to embrace it. And then ultimately, we absolutely are going to have to make sure everybody's paying their fair share when it comes to how we manage our road systems.
I'd like to add or jump in on that question too, and I really appreciate it, because one of the real problems with complex human systems like transportation systems is, and systems thinkers have really pointed to this, is the lack of feedback. And the lack or delay of feedback in a system tends to lead to bad choices. You see a problem, and because you don't have proper feedback or immediate enough feedback, you tend to make further bad choices. You may react in the wrong direction. And one of the things that really is illustrative of that in transportation in particular is the externalization of costs. And you touched on this because you talked about the road system. Now, if one of the goals is to reduce oil consumption, certainly transitioning the locomotive technology to electric makes sense because it's adaptable to renewables ultimately. Although I would point out that most of ours still comes from coal, and we're still going to be pumping greenhouse gases. And while it feels very nice to be driving an electric vehicle, I'm sure, there's that problem of, again, we're externalizing the cost through environmental degradation and climate change. And also, it's important to recognize that asphalt is comprised in significant part from petroleum. And so we still have that. So we have to start looking at this more systematically in terms of addressing these goals of energy independence, getting away from oil, for example, dealing with climate change, building a more fair system where everybody has access, and also making sure that we're paying as consumers and users for all of our impacts, and that we have more feedback, more direct feedback in that thing. So a lot of the cost, when you talk about policy changes, for example, we, as the residents, don't pay through gas taxes, but we pay for things through our city governments, on-street parking for personal vehicles. That's one of those hidden subsidies that, again, it's an externalized cost. We don't get that feedback directly. There are a lot of examples like that, and I don't want to take too much time going into them, but we have to really think more systemically or systematically, really, at solving these multiple linked issues of transportation, access, you know, environmental sustainability, energy independence, and other things. And one of the first ways I would say is to start really doing full cost accounting attendant with the policy proposals that we have to look at removing some of those subsidies and making the feedback more direct to the consumer, so that in the at the end of the day, when you do start calculating it, you see that, for example, investments in transit make a lot of sense because they're much more energy efficient compared to any other transportation mode, and the costs of O&M are much greatly competitive, I would say, at the very least.
Okay, Tom?
Another thing I might just say about the gas tax issue is the gas tax is broken right now and is nowhere near in its current model serving our national interest in terms of how we take care of our roads, bridges, and infrastructure. It's the way it's calculated, and there's a bunch of issues with it, but it's not keeping up with demand of just existing gas vehicles. The impact of the electric vehicles in the short term is a drop in the bucket. So we have to overhaul that whole system about thinking, how do we pay for and maintain our road infrastructure?
Good point.
And when you're thinking about that, and that's where you bring in this full cost accounting, and there are some pretty simple things for electric vehicles. You could have a small surcharge on the vehicle registration once a year for your licensing that would be estimated mileage. Things like that. Easy, you know, so it's just a little paradigm shift. Far bigger thing is thinking about just what it takes to maintain roads and, you know, at least index the gas tax for inflation. We can go on and on and on about the gas tax problem. So yeah.
An increase in CAFE standards is
yeah,
having an impact.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So, but you're right, it's a new paradigm to think about. So wait a second, what are we doing here? And then what is the sort of trickle effect on a variety of different policies? You wouldn't even think about it first.
My name is Glenn Johnson, LaPorte. You plug your car in when you get home. That's the highest use on the electric bill already. They're trying to avoid that period of time. So is it even available if people started using electric? And how much coal does it take to power your car when you're using electric? I assume it's still coal. And that's going by the wayside, so then it'll be not nuclear, I guess, and then oil, or I mean some type of natural gas. Yeah. Why not convert the car to natural gas?
I think I can handle it. So you asked a question about coming home and you plug in your vehicle when you get home, and isn't that during the peak time of electrical demand, and doesn't that impact the whole system? You raise an important question about, you know, the charging electric vehicle will add additional demand, and there are times of day when the electrical grid system is more stressed, and we're bringing on more expensive forms of generation during those peak times, and that's not when we'd want to charge electric vehicles. So what we're seeing across the country as communities are implementing more intelligently managed utility systems is the ability to provide price incentives to reward people for using electricity off-peak when it's cheap to generate. And so it's called time of use rates. And as systems become, and that's a direction where more communities are going, is basically your rates would be very cheap in the middle of the night and higher during the peak hot summer days when everybody's air conditioning's running. So one of these things these vehicles do is usually they have the programming right in the car where you get to program it, when do you want the charger to turn on. You might plug it in, but it might be waiting until the electricity's cheap. And so, and when you do that, actually, you know, since our distribution grid is all set up for that peak time, and in the middle of the night we've got all this excess capacity. So that's when you load on the electric vehicles. It's not going to stress out the existing transformers. It's not like we have to rebuild all this capacity in the grid if we can provide the incentives to do off-peak charging. And that's coming. You know, in Fort Collins, we're well positioned to do that with the Advanced Meter Fort Collins project. And that's the vision nationally, is everybody knows that time of use, off-peak charging is the way to go.
And is that something the smart meter can do?
Well, yeah, exactly. That is, see, once you have the smart, the advanced meters in.
Oh, okay. They're not smart anymore, they're advanced.
Advanced meters.
Okay.
That enables us to do so much more in terms of how we can be, effective in managing, giving consumers the option about being able to charge off peak and that kind of thing. So.
And the other thing, unless I'm not informed anymore, but I think when they use the extra power at Platte River, they use gas. They use natural gas, not coal. So
Yeah.
I don't think they're using more coal for peaking power. They're using natural
Right.
gas.
And the thing about electricity, of shifting to electricity as a transportation fuel, the energy sources for electricity are varied. And you can generate electricity from coal, also hydro, natural gas, nuclear, wind, solar. It gives us the most options and the most diversified fuel source to be able to move cars. And in some parts of the country, there's no coal. The Pacific Northwest, it's all hydro. Other parts of the country, it's all natural gas. So it's that diversity of not having all of our eggs in one basket, oil or compressed natural gas. That's why on the roadmap, big picture, long term, that's why people conclude, look, we got to figure out how to do this with electricity. So.
Okay, Ben, you had a comment?
Well, I do think that ultimately these are the only vehicles on the road that are going to get cleaner the longer they're on the road.
That are going to get what?
They are going to get cleaner the longer they are on the road, because
Yes.
ultimately our electricity system is the way we deliver power, the way we generate power is going to get cleaner. And actually, if you look at, you mentioned SWEEP in the beginning of this, the Southwestern Energy Efficiency Project. They just released a report, and it was specific to the Rocky Mountain region, and we are actually one of the more coal-dependent states still. But ultimately, based on projections, it is very quickly these cars are going to become even cleaner and cleaner, because we are going to become less and less dependent on coal or any other power generation source as we diversify the way that we generate electricity. So, the idea that, and I think it's an important question, and I actually hope people continue to ask it, because I think ultimately, not only are we going to win, our electric vehicle is going to be a success because people ask questions like that. It's going to be a success because people ask the cost question, and actually the answer is a very good answer. People are going to ask the cost around environmental impacts. It's a very good answer. They're going to ask questions about health impacts. It's a very good answer. And I think that's the thing that excites me, is these aren't challenging questions. They're important questions, but they aren't challenging questions. They're actually the questions we need people to be thinking about when they're thinking about the car they're going to buy.
And this is for the gentleman from Prieto Battery. And one of the other concerns about trying to ramp over our transportation infrastructure rapidly to electric cars is not just some of the externalities, but also the carbon impact of manufacture. And so I'm wondering if Prieto Battery, if you're looking at the cradle-to-grave carbon cost of your product and seeing what you can do to reduce that, and especially including the end of the life cycle, the recycling side of it.
So I'll answer the recycling part first. The advantages of having an all solid state battery is typically the more toxic component of lithium-ion batteries to get rid of is associated with that liquid electrolyte. And then the salt that's also dissolved in that liquid electrolyte, because it's toxic in and of itself, and once exposed to water or moisture, it forms a pretty toxic acid. Since we're getting away from the liquid electrolyte, it makes it a lot easier for the final cells to be recycled or for that process to continue. That being said, that is definitely an area that once more lithium-ion batteries, especially solid-state lithium-ion batteries, are produced, I think that industry will start to become more mature. They'll see a need, and there's some technology hurdles that need to be overcome, and I think some smart people will take up those challenges and make a pretty viable business associated with it. With respect to the production or the carbon impact, the carbon footprint with the manufacturing of the batteries, we haven't really looked at that per se, but we looked at the environmental impact of our processes. And so by taking out the liquid electrolyte and the salt that's associated with it, those are toxic chemicals that are organic in nature, and all of our manufacturing processes are water-based, and they don't include any toxic chemicals. So it's really more focused on being environmental friendly, with the also side effect of, or positive side effect of reducing costs, because again, traditional lithium-ion batteries are made through more toxic, more difficult to handle organic type of solvents, and moving away from those solvents to more water-based processes helps.
I actually have a question for Derek.
That's fine.
As the
Go ahead.
engineer.
Yes,
so,
good.
Because one of the things I think that also is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that the lithium ultimately is recyclable. So ultimately, it's not the thing that's actually drying up when you're using the battery, and that's one of the beauties here is we'll be able to capture that lithium and continually use it over and over again. So that's part one. Part two is I think we're going to continue to see an aftermarket purpose for these batteries. So as we look at distributed generation, right? We have power that comes from the sun. We have power that comes from the wind. Sometimes that wind blows at night. Where do we put the power that it's generated? And a lot of people believe that the batteries are actually going to be perfectly cycled to create storage facility or storage options for that wind production. And so after it helps drive us thousands and thousands of miles down the road, we can then put those in storage tanks essentially and store that power that's generated at night through wind or solar or various other things. So, but maybe if you can make sure I'm right.
Sure, no, you're absolutely right. And I'll add on to that, it's not just the lithium that can be recycled, but there's also metals that are associated with the active material and the batteries that, again, if you can recycle and recoup them, would help lower the cost. And you bring up a good point about aftermarket usage. Typically, especially for the electric vehicle application, the standard is once it hits 80% of its initial capacity or power, it's considered a dead battery. But you still have 80% still available. And so aftermarket applications to even recoup some of the money, the initial purchase money for that as well, and it would be perfectly good for other applications, but not necessarily for an electric vehicle.
So like a backup battery for a data center.
Exactly.
Or a neighborhood.
Or, yeah.
You know,
yeah,
if you're, like Fort Collins is starting these community, the solar gardens, right?
Yeah,
And it could end up being a perfect solution there where you're, that ends up being one of the storage components that exist for storing that solar power that's generated in a community.
And that's one of the real exciting things about the advancements that are being made for energy storage devices that are associated with electric vehicles. That technology can be directly transferred to this distributive, for the power grid way to store energy locally, so that not the capacity is not wasted, or you don't have an abundance of capacity to compensate for the peak time as well.
That is a really good point. I think there's a question about why is the government investing in developing this battery technology. It's not just about cars. There's huge solving energy storage.
Yes,
Capacity is a big deal in terms of breaking into a whole different paradigm about how we work, how we manage energy. So it just so happens that vehicles are at the forefront of driving it because driving it. So yeah, but there's a lot of stuff in terms of grid management and other areas where the developing battery technology is very significant.
Okay, so are you saying that the lithium battery can be reused after it's been in a car for storage, for power, for other things?
It can be, and one of the reasons why electric vehicles batteries can be applied to grid storage is that typically the batteries that we use now to power our electronics, they have a lot of energy, but they can't discharge very fast. And what you need for electric vehicle applications are batteries that have a high energy content, but also can discharge very fast. So to kind of put that in perspective, energy will give you the distance your car can drive. The power associated with that battery will dictate how fast you can accelerate your car. And so, for instance, with the use of renewable, and you need that power component for grid storage as well. And so, for instance, out at Rawhide, there's a meter, I believe, that essentially tells you how much energy is being generated at some of the wind farms up in northern Colorado. And I have a friend of mine that works up there, and he typically says that meter is at its highest at night when nobody really needs it. And so, and you can't do anything with it because we have no good cost-effective way right now to actually store that energy that's being generated from these wind farms. And you could say the same thing for massive solar farms as well. And so the technology advancements that are being incorporated to electric vehicles are directly applied, because then we have a device that could store the energy while it's being generated at night when no one needs it, but then also has the power capability to be utilized during, you know, peak consumption.
Okay, and that's a real breakthrough, I guess, or a real advancement.
It would be a real advancement. That's correct.
Right. Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I'd just say that with the commuter rail that we hope will be built here, one of the great advantages is that you can change out the engine technology, what drives the engine itself, fairly easily, and you don't have to change a whole fleet because you're only talking about a fairly small number of vehicles compared to, say, the automobile fleet of the North Front Range. And certainly better battery technology will enable a quicker transition to an all-electric locomotive system as well.
Sure. Okay.
You know, it's funny. I just like to touch on this sort of tension that you point out about, well, is it rail or electric vehicles? It's not an either or effect. They're very complementary.
That's right.
The idea, I think, well, first of all, sort of the transit-oriented land use patterns, shorter commute distance, mixed use, live-work kind of things, that resonates with what works well for transit, works well for electric vehicles. The other thing is if there was regional commuter rail so you could get to Denver without having to drive, then all of a sudden a short-range electric vehicle is so much more practical. You use your EV around town and you hit the park and ride, get on the regional, you know, commuter rail, and it's a perfect marriage. In fact, it's that kind of transformation, which is where, so we want them both to succeed. And,
that's right.
And
Yes,
so.
The thing is that, of course, if you have limited dollars, where is it going to come from? And so, where do you get
But the business proposition of the EV, given what we're already spending on stuff, it makes sense. So it's, you know, there's some initial investment in order to prime the pump to get things going to help the new technology come in, but.
Right, and of course we have Max in Fort Collins that we hope will make people use mass transit more. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I think we've pretty much covered it, unless there are any kind of questions. There's another one. Go ahead.
The type of commuter rail that we're talking about would link the downtowns, for example, of Fort Collins, Loveland, Berthoud, Longmont, where we would connect with RTD. And then you'd be able to take RTD fairly seamlessly to the airport, to Denver downtown, or Boulder, wherever you're going. It would also connect in the plan, the proposal that we've unveiled, would also connect the Weld County communities, Greeley, Johnstown, Evans, a number of other places that have been experiencing fairly rapid growth. All of these are, the beauty of it is that we're going to use the existing freight rail lines, and hopefully, or that's the plan, hopefully that would also encourage a gradual movement of freight out of the urban corridor and out to perhaps an eastern bypass, which had been talked about in the past. That's a long-range plan, but in terms of distances, we would have it would serve stations as close as 2 miles apart, but it would be a very express service. It would not be the same as high-speed rail. You wouldn't get 150-mile-an-hour transit as you would, for example, when you're going long distances across Japan or China or other places that have it. But you would have a very efficient transit system, much like an express bus, you might think of it. The current flex system operates. This would eventually supplant that and provide much more connectivity throughout the region and better times, headways for the users.
Okay, any other questions?
Would it be okay if I just made one comment about
Sure.
kind of a little bit of kind of personal experience? I think it's just important. Ben mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of the cost savings in owning an electric vehicle, and I just wanted to re-emphasize that. Just to put this sort of into my personal perspective, we've had our vehicle since May of 2012, and we calculated that we've driven about 86% of our miles on electric. The only time we really have had to drive on the gas engine has been if we've taken a trip to Denver, or once in a while when it's very cold, it actually turns over to using, right at the beginning when you start up, to using the gas engine. But we've used 4 tanks of gas since we've had this electric vehicle. And we drive, probably 35 miles on average per day. And I think that for certain people, it's just an ideal type of vehicle. For us, most of our driving is around town. And as Tom mentioned, most people just, they drive it around town, they come home, they charge it up. I think the only thing we've had to do in terms of maintenance was to refill the wiper fluid on the vehicle. And that's probably all we're going to have to do. For me, it's perfect because I don't like to deal with vehicle maintenance. And I don't have to worry about, the types of things that most people do with a regular vehicle. And it's just, I think there's more and more different types of products that are coming out as well that suit different types of needs. When we were looking at what type of vehicle to buy, we really had a choice between the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf. And we were a little bit nervous at the time to buy a Nissan Leaf. It did not have the backup gas engine, and we had what they call range anxiety. What if we get to Denver and we can't find a charging station and we're stuck? Or what if we needed to go somewhere and we just can't make it? So for us, the Chevy Volt was an ideal product. As more and more products come out, I think there will be more products suited for different types of needs and uses, and it's just an all-around kind of very practical product.
Okay, let's go around. We'll skip you. That was your final statement. Everybody else has about 45 seconds. What I said was, what do you hope will come of Drive Electric Northern Colorado and that initiative? What's your best hope?
Well, I hope we learn how to help make electric vehicles practical and successful, and that we can share that knowledge and success with other communities.
Okay, Ben?
I have 2 quick things. One is, if you haven't had a chance to get in a vehicle, on April 20th, the Fort Collins Earth Day, we're going to have a ride and drive event, and it's the perfect chance. Come down. We'll put you behind the wheel, and it'll give you your chance to push the gas pedal and see how fast these things go and feel how cool they are and how quiet they are. It's at Spring Creek Gardens. Thank you for setting up the question, Barbara. Spring Creek Gardens.
Gardens.
Or Gardens on Spring Creek. Sorry, pardon me. So that'll be happening, and then also we're partnering with some of our favorite brewers in town, so Odell's and New Belgium, and they are very invested in this technology, and so they are bringing their sort of iconic force in Fort Collins to this table and are also going to be hosting a ride and drive. Now, clearly we'll be separating that from the product that they make themselves, but I think ultimately part of what we're doing is we're turning this into kind of connecting to the culture that exists here. And I just think people, if they drive them, the cars sell themselves.
Okay, Roger.
Well, actually, I just had a question. Do we see prices of these things coming down over time to the point where somebody like myself...
A home run, if you will. The Leaf just this last year dropped to $21,000, wow. And with tax credits right now, so you get $13,000 in tax credits. And if the base price is $21,000, I think that starts to get to a place that most people can afford.
All right, sign me up.
Okay. And Derek?
Well, for me, I hope as people become more educated about electric vehicles, it also inspires young people to get involved in the science and engineering aspect of it, because if we can really develop that technology here in the United States and be a leader in the world, I think it just has economic benefits, social benefits, environmental benefits, and I'd like to see that happen here in the United States.
Great. Thank you so much. Very interesting discussion. And thank you to our studio audience and our viewing audience. This CrossCurrents program will be rebroadcast at various times during the month on Channel 14. Please consult your local listings for exact dates and times. Copies of recent CrossCurrents programs are available for checkout at the 3 Poudre Valley Library District libraries. The video is available at the League of Women Voters website, which is www.lwv-larimercounty.org. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.